Hello, fabulous people. My name is Michelle Harper Kowalczyk. I use she, her pronouns, and I serve as the Associate Director in the Center for Student Involvement. And most importantly, I serve as one of the co-advisors for Undergraduate Student Government, or SGSU. We are excited that you're excited to be candidates in our election cycle. And I'm here today to just help give you the information that you need to be successful as a candidate and run a fabulous campaign. So let me share my screen. Okay, fabulous. So many of the things that I will cover today are policies that live within the elections code. You will receive a link during the session to be able to access the elections code because it does answer, it goes into much more detail around what you can expect, what the policies are, what certain practices are. We want to give you a clear enough understanding so that you have enough to get you started, but the elections code is for sure a resource that we expect you to be referring to throughout your campaign. So jumping into the presentation, welcome. You are here at the SGSU mandatory orientation. One thing that we want to be very clear and explicit about from the beginning is when campaigning begins. So candidates are not allowed to campaign until March 31st of 2021. This means no distribution of any material, not online, not in person, no posters, no flyers, nothing that's out visible until March 31st. However, you can be working on things ahead of time just to make sure that come March 31st, you are prepared and ready to go. And we'll talk a little bit about campaign violations later, because if you do campaign before this deadline, then it is considered a campaign violation and we would have to adjudicate that process. So let's talk about campaign materials. Sorry, this is Charlie. Charlie says hi. The biggest thing with regards to approval, so basically anything that you post on social media, again, flyers, any materials that you're using to advertise that you are seeking office has to be approved by the elections chair before it goes out into the world. So basically, don't post things randomly all over the place. That's just rude. And don't use anything that has not already been approved. Flyers. During this time, we are using a virtual approval process. So the flyers must be approved via email. So first you'll email a flyer if you are on campus, if you are wanting to put flyers up in any of the buildings or in the residence halls. First, it would go through the elections chair for approval. Then if you're posting generally to, academic buildings, to the student center, CSI, the Center for Student Involvement, does your second level of approval. If you're interested in posting them in residence life, any of the residence halls, then Housing and Residence Life, or HRL, is your second level of approval. HRL does require a minimum of 14 days prior to posting. So you want to make sure that you give them ample time before that March 31st begin to make sure that they have what they need to get it up on time. You're only allowed 25 flyers on campus. And this is basically because we're also looking at one flyer per campus bulletin board. So if you did more than that, then you'd be like having to put things duplicate places. So just keep that in mind as you are thinking about the number of things that you're printing. using thumbtacks um, instead of other things, not tape. You're not taping things to a bulletin board anyway. Flyers are, it's normal page size, 8.5 by 11. You can't use any slogans or images that are copyrighted material. And a quick Google search can help you in determining whether or not something is copyrighted. Basically, if you're pulling it from a TV show, from a cultural reference, it's usually going to be copyrighted. The most important thing on the flyer, so you can, put your image, put whatever it is that you're representing, but it has to include your name, the position that you're seeking, the voting dates, or the election dates, but the dates when people would be voting, and contact information, usually your SU email address. If you are not on campus or not interested in printing or instead are interested in doing virtual TV screens, that's another option. Similar process where the elections chair approves it and then the Center for Student Involvement does the second level of approval. It is important to note that the dimensions for the Reach TV screens that are in the Student Center, they're more like a PowerPoint slide as opposed to a like a vertical flyer. So orient your things. It'll be much more visible for folks if you use PowerPoint dimensions. Chalk, again, if you're on campus, you're eligible, you're able to chalk campus, but the biggest thing is that you have to submit, again, anything that you post has to be approved ahead of time. The chalk has to be easily washed away. So you can get like chalk paint, don't do that, or don't put any coating on it to preserve the chalk. Those are not allowed. Just regular old chalk, sidewalk chalk, kiddo chalk works great. And really, you're only allowed to chalk in the quad. So where the fountain is on campus, only within that, and not on the stairs, not on the ramps, but just the quad. It can only stay up for 5 days, usually in a Seattle rain. That's not a problem, but if it doesn't rain for a while, you are responsible for removing it. So there's that. Social media has to be approved in advance. You can submit all of these things that need to be approved in advance. You can email the SGSU elections. It's sgsuelections@seattleu.edu. So you can that's the elections chair email, and that way there's a paper trail or electronic trail, I guess I should say, to show what you've submitted and that it's been approved. Something to note is that all campaign materials on social media has to be open and accessible to all SU students. So anything that requires that somebody would have to join. So a Facebook group is not allowed because that's not open and accessible to everybody. By nature of it's in a group, it's separate. Another thing is because it has to be approved in advance, any post that that doesn't allow for that, or any platform that does not allow for a draft to be created, then submitted for approval before being posted, isn't allowed. The last two things on here is that, and we'll talk a bit about what it means to for people to campaign together and what are the rules around one candidate supporting another candidate. But you can't use your social media to promote another student's candidacy. Lastly is, and I think I said this earlier, if I didn't, and I'll say it again. So if you get folks to volunteer to help you out with your campaign, whether that's helping you with creating things or posting things, it's important that you're sharing this video with them so that they also know the rules, because if they make a mistake or if they violate policy, you are held accountable because they are working on your behalf. So it's up to you to make sure that they have the information that they need to not violate policy. Endorsements. Sometimes folks are really involved in the club community and they're like, man, I really want to be able to say X club endorses me for candidacy, or club is really passionate about a particular candidate and wants to speak on as the club to say, oh, we endorse this person. So it's not a common practice, but if that is something that you're interested in, um, the club has to have a process by which club members at large can provide their feedback on the endorsement. It has to be submitted in writing to the elections chair that the club does endorse this candidate. It has to be signed by the club president and one other officer, and it cannot be signed by the candidate. So if the candidate is the club president, then they have to find somebody else to stand in and offer that second signature for the endorsement. So what does an endorsement mean? So it essentially means that if I am president of the Squirrel Club and the Squirrel Club wants to endorse me, and they've done all the channels, they've done the things to endorse me, that means that the club on their social media can say, we endorse this candidate. It means I, on my flyers, can say endorsed by the Squirrel Club. So there can be that additional level, just like endorsements and how they operate in campaigns at the local and national level. Restrictions. So clubs can endorse candidates, organizations cannot. Most of the time we treat our clubs and organizations as they're pretty similar, but this is one of the areas in which there is a distinction. So an organization is different from clubs in that they receive university funding, they're usually housed within a department, and they have a person who it is in their job description to serve as an advisor for that organization. So for example, SGSU is an organization. They receive funding from the university, they're housed within CSI, and it is in my job description to serve as their advisor. RHA is similar. SEEK, our student programming board, orientation, the Spectator, KXSU, these are all examples of organizations. Because those organizations are housed within the structure of the university, they don't have the same, an endorsement from them would seem as like an endorsement from the university itself. And that's not how we operate. Whereas a club, because they don't have that built in, they're not sort of embedded in that way to the structure of the university, they have the freedom to do endorsements. Individual campaigning. If you're transferred from another campus, you may see other campuses, they sort of run, they call tickets. It's essentially like, oh, this person is on the Squirrel Club ticket, and we're promoting this president, this vice president, and these, 3 representatives, and they're all part of the Squirrel Club, and we're like promoting them as campaigning together. That's not how we do it here. On our campus, we do individual campaigning only. So that means that even though I am the president of Squirrel Club and I'm really excited for somebody else who's in the Squirrel Club to also, I'm running for SGSU president, they're running for executive vice president, and we really want to work together as a team in the next year. We have a shared vision, whatever. Even though that may be true, we're super excited, we have a lot of the same ideas, we cannot campaign together. We have to have different flyers. None of our flyers can say the other person's name. Our content has to be different. We can maybe use like a similar color scheme, but has to be clearly separate and different. I cannot pass out materials on behalf of the person who's seeking the EVP position. I can only pass out my own materials. And I'm sorry, pass out in this COVID world, we're not really passing things out, but distributing, posting, sharing, what have you. we'll talk about this. We want to make sure that our campaigns are equitable. And again, this comes up a little bit less often in our virtual world, but we do have a $25 cap on the amount of money that you're able to spend in your campaign expenses. So similarly to like, we have to keep it separate, we have to also keep the money separate. So we couldn't like pool our money together to make $50 and do something that way. No, totally separate and it all counts. Removal of campaign materials and the impact on the maximum number of flyers. So one general, like within 48 hours of the end of elections, everything has to come down. Before that, if something is destroyed, the candidate has to show proof. So for example, if you posted a flyer outside, it rained, it got destroyed. You have to show proof that it was destroyed in order to replace the materials exactly as they were. And any additional funding that additional funds that you're spending to reprint would be deducted again from your $25. So it's not like, oh, this one was destroyed, I'm going to buy another flyer, but don't count that against me. It still does. It is included in your monetary totals. If a campaign material is removed because it was posted inappropriately, that cannot be replaced. So that's like, you had your 24 of them were posted inappropriately. So sorry, you only got one now that you're able to work with. And any like moving, removal, defacing, any damage caused to another candidate's campaign material is a campaign violation, and it will be adjudicated in the process. Campaign expenses, keep receipts of all of your expenses. If you already have materials like, oh, I already have 25 pieces of paper and a printer at home, then even though you're not technically spending the money, we do say that those count towards your like $25 of printing costs. So usually we say things like, price out what it is for a pack of paper. I'm trying to remember the specific name for what they call those, but a pack of paper, if it has 100 sheets of it, divided by 4, cool. To get like the approximate cost of how much it would spend to use those 25 pieces of paper. So that's the last piece where it's talking about materials will be assessed at fair market value. Financial contributions from clubs or organizations are not allowed. Cannot combine your expenses. Make sure that you're reporting your expenses accurately. And if there is any falsification, then you'll be subject to sanctions or potentially disqualification from election. Things that are restricted all the time. You're not allowed to place flyers and things on vehicles. This is a university policy. Amplified music or speech is not allowed. And I guess I should have removed this parentheses. Posting campaign materials on top of somebody else's, that's rude and not allowed. Saturating one area with your own publicity, not allowed. Again, one flyer per bulletin board. And anything that interferes with classroom instruction. During COVID-19, this is university policy. Right now, we're not doing banners or roll downs. Those are, if you've been on campus prior to this year, then you would know what those are. They're sort of these butcher paper roll downs that we put up in the student center. But right now we're not doing those. Giveaways, anything that requires sort of handing out of materials from one person to another, not allowed because of transmission of things. Tabling and table tents are also not allowed. I will say that these are not allowed as of March 9th. And if there's any change to that policy, you'll definitely receive information from us via your SU email so that it's in writing. We already talked about recruiting folks and making sure that you're following policy, not only the elections code, but also CLU Code of Student Conduct. Slandering, libels, and, just starting to run a yucky campaign, not allowed. Like, let's be, we want to make sure that our campaigns are in alignment with our values, right? How are you wanting to lead in as a leader in SGSU, as a human? What kind of a leader are you wanting to be, and make sure that that is reflected in your behavior and choices during the campaign time. And if you do already hold a leadership position in an organization on campus, you can't use any of the materials or office hours or office spaces that are available to you through that position to help you give you a leg up in the in SGSU elections, because again, it's an equity issue. And I'll make sure that you also get the link to the addendum, the COVID-19 addendum to club policies that does a more robust sort of outline of what things are not allowed during this COVID piece. Okay, cool. So we've talked a lot about things that are allowed, things that aren't, and what happens. So campaign violation process. Elections code violations must be submitted in writing to the elections chair. So that's that SGSU elections at clu.edu email address within 1 business day of the alleged violation. Anybody on campus affiliated with campus can submit a violation. So any student, staff, faculty member. Many times we get calls from housing saying, hey, this person is sliding things under doors. That's not allowed. Doing things they shouldn't do. Housing is definitely somebody who has my number to be able to be like, hey, something's happening that shouldn't be. Elections code violations cannot be submitted anonymously. That's important because we have to be able to have dialogue in our accountability process. And we need to be able to hear from folks. So so make sure that it's attached to a specific name when you submit it. So what happens after you submit it? And this is, again, just broad strokes. There is more detail in the elections code. Hopefully we don't need to get there. So we can give more. Obviously you have the elections code, and if this happens, we can get into more of the nitty gritty. But if we receive a campaign violation allegation, the Elections Commission will convene within 2 days, and they'll hold a hearing essentially to determine whether or not the alleged violation is true, if it violates the election code, and what sanctions are appropriate. Usually in a hearing, it's maybe not a dialogue between, it's most likely not a dialogue where it's the candidate and the person who submitted the hearing. They're not in the same space. Usually we have conversations with the person who submitted the violation, and then we have a separate conversation with the person who is the candidate to try and get to the bottom of sort of truth and perspective and see what happened there. Sanctions include things like up to disqualification, but usually it's a much smaller violation, ranging from things like statements to a fine to apologies, these kinds of things. Other things before I move on to Code of Student Conduct. Nope. So if the behavior not only violates the elections code, but also violates the Code of Student Conduct, then SGSU will also pass on that information to the Dean of Students office to go through the integrity formation process. again, I don't assume or expect that you all are going to have to go through this process. So I know there's like I feel like I heard myself say, this is not allowed a lot. So let's like talk a little bit about things that are allowed before I dig into the timeline. Um, so you can utilize your social media platforms to get the word out. You want to make sure that uh, our elections chair and elections commissioners are following and liking whichever they're able to be essentially able to see any place that you're posting. We know during this time, like social media is something that people are using. With prior approval, you can also use some of the Discord channels that exist on campus. I know that's one way to get the word out. You can be using flyers on campus. I have been to campus recently. I know that there are there's hundreds of students that are there. So it's a great way to reach them, and it's not overly saturated right now with other flyers as it would be in a normal school year. We can promote videos. We'll talk a little bit about the Record Yourself campaign event. So thinking about ways that you can engage with folks in a digital platform. Many times people will ask their professors if they can make an announcement at the beginning of class, or if the professor would be comfortable with them leveraging, the messaging capabilities that exist within Canvas to communicate with other classmates. Again, that would have to have your professors like approval before you start hijacking their academic platform for your personal purposes. But many faculty members are amenable to it. So those are just some examples, and you can hear from examples from other folks who have participated in elections before, what they've done. So let's talk timeline. So I mentioned this record yourself piece. Taylor will be sorry. Taylor will be submitting a list of questions to you, and we're asking that each candidate record yourself answering answering a number of the questions, and we can get into the nitty-gritty about how many are required and whatever, within a specific time limit. So Taylor will give you all of those specifications, and that video recording is due to the SGSU elections email address by March 29th at 6 p.m. So this is March 29th is like the Monday of the week that we come back from into the spring quarter. So yeah, that's our one campaign event. So that is required for every person to submit in order to stay in compliance and like demonstrate that you are a committed candidate. March 31st is the official day that campaigning begins. So we're asking you to submit that ahead of time. SGSU we're going to put on our YouTube channels and social media and promote it through our pieces. We're not going to post those until 2 days later, but that gives us 2 days to get things organized, to run through, troubleshoot any issues that you're having. So I don't want you to be like, oh, you're already violating your own policies. False. We won't post anything publicly until the 31st. So you'll have about a week before voting actually begins to get the buzz out, to start making sure that folks are clear on what you are about as a candidate, what your interests are, what you're hoping to see, the kind of things that you're bringing about on campus. Students will be voting from April 7th through April 9th. So again, make sure that this is on any of your flyers or publications. You want to make sure that you include those dates. Voting will be conducted via Connect SU, and SGSU will be responsible for getting the word out that when elections open up, and you, of course, are able to use your platforms to make sure that the word spreads to students at large that voting has started. Campaigning ends on April 9th, as does voting. On April 10th, we will be informing you of results via your SU email, and you'll be able to begin online modules. If not on the 10th, then shortly after. So part of your training for this role is that you participate in our iLead Leadership Development Program. So iLead consists of two parts. The first part is a series of online modules for you to complete leading up to a conference that happens on April 23rd and 24th. The conference is virtual. So you'll get access shortly after, like I said, if not on the 10th, shortly after, to begin those online modules, and you'll receive an email with more instructions on what that looks like. April 11th is 48 hours after campaigning closed or voting closed. So that's when any materials that you had posted up need to come down. On Wednesday, April 21st, we're hosting a meet and greet where incoming SGSU members and outgoing SGSU members can come together and mingle, and you can get introduced to one another and just get a better sense of what's happening. You're also, and you'll again receive an email with this, but every Wednesday from 6 to 8 p.m., SGSU has their rep assembly meetings, and we do strongly encourage folks who have just been elected to attend those rep assemblies, to begin attending those rep assemblies and getting connected with people who are currently in the position that you were just elected into, just to help a smooth transition and make sure that you have a really sound understanding of where the organization is, so that you are set up to be successful. And the last date that we have right now is the iLead conference. As I mentioned, it's April 23rd and 24th. We will be adding additional dates to your calendar to help get the new team organized before we go into summer for our September trainings that will happen. But all of that will come later. Right now, let's just focus on getting you through these next 2 months and know that we're here for you. I apologize that I can't be present with you all today. I am excited for you to join our team and just wish you luck in the process. And I know that there are many people in the room who are able to answer your questions. So thank you so much. Have a great day.